What's up, YouTube? Welcome back. My name is Duress, and today I'm really excited because it's time for another expanded set review with Silver Tempest coming right on the horizon, coming out November 11th. So a few quick notes. We'll be evaluating cards strictly in the context of expanded, no standard. We're working off of a 1 through 5 rating system. Your 5s are your ubiquitous trainer staples and your top tier Pokemon. 4s are your slightly more specialized cards. 3s, cards that are slotting into less competitive decks. I wouldn't really recommend bringing them to a tournament, but they might still do pretty well in the ladder. 2s are cards that slot into very fringe decks that might not do as well in the ladder. And then 1s are cards that aren't really playable, but are worth mentioning what kind of support they need or what kind of metagame they'd have to find themselves in. Basically, what kind of stars need to align to make these cards playable, because they could have some sort of potential. If you want to know more about my philosophy regarding the ratings as well as expanded in general, I definitely recommend checking out the beginning of my Lost Origins set review. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into it. Alright, so we're doing a bit of a different setup. We've got Pokebeach up here. Last time with Lost Origin, the set list came out much earlier than it did for Silver Tempest, so it didn't have as much time to make the whole PowerPoint presentation, but this is still going to do the trick. Definitely would love some feedback as to, what people prefer, but yeah. First up, we have Sunflora. I think Sunflora is kind of interesting and definitely worth talking about. I'd still only really give it like a 1, to be honest, but like it can go up to 220 damage. I mean, 250 with a choice belt, choice band, whatever you prefer. I think it's at least worth talking about. Stage 1, obviously, but I don't think you could expect to have some sort of attack like this on a basic, 1 prizer. So where it slots in, I'm not really sure. It's obviously a very energy heavy deck, but being able to just double colorless energy attack, not bad. I mean, you could Wally it as well, which would be kind of funny. We have the Superior. This is definitely not Superior. We'll just skip straight ahead to Superior V-Star. I don't think Superior V is really anything worth talking about. Double attachment for 120, not particularly exciting. Grass colorless, excuse me. Royal Tornado 190, move around your energy. And then for grass, Coiling Stars V-Star power, and then it's energy based, 60 for each energy, and then switch this Pokemon with one of your bench. Just very very uninspiring, to say the least. Not really doesn't really have any sort of direction. Can't really imagine it going in any sort of deck. So yeah, this is really just, I actually don't even have this as a 1, I just have this as a 0, but I think the V's are always at least worth mentioning in the context of expanded. But yeah, it just doesn't get there. One card I wanted to talk about was Amoonguss. I think this ability is hilarious. It's a 90 HP stage 1, but I don't think that really matters because I don't think you even play Fungus. You just have the ability Prank Spores. Whenever this card is discarded from your hand by the effect of your opponent's Pokemon's attacks or abilities, or by the effect of your opponent's item card or supporter card, discard all cards from your opponent's hand. And then it's got Grass Colorless, 50 damage. Opponent's active Pokemon is asleep, but I don't think you're ever using that again because you're never playing it to the bench. You're just playing this for the ability. Again, this is why I really wish there was sideboards in Pokemon, because if you play against some sort of, discard deck or control deck, mill deck, something like that, well, maybe not a mill deck, but, some sort of discard deck, and you discard this, like, you just decimate your opponent. Your opponent just empties their hand. I think that's kind of hilarious, but not really worth rating in expanded because it's not playable in the way that expanded is currently formatted. It just doesn't really work. There's a Chestnut V, Spiky Striker ability. As long as it's in play, whenever your active Chestnut V is damage from attack from your opponent's Pokemon, put 3 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. So you can stack this, but even at that, it's still not very good. You know, there's better kind of attacks, or not even attacks. Well, I guess there's better things like this, like Dracozolt. Like, I mean, I prefer to play Turtonator over this, but like, yeah, that's just isn't really doing it in terms of damage output, especially with this attack. Like, that's, I guess you're doing 250 if you have all four. You know, you attack and then take an attack. That's 250, but it's not really the damage output we're looking for, so that's a hard skip. Radiant Serena, I think, is a solid 1. Again, the Radiant rule, you can't have more than one Radiant Pokemon in your deck. Unfortunately, there's not really any reason to be playing this over literally any other. Well, not any other. There's some, I mean, like, can't imagine you play, I mean, I can see more of a reason to play something like Blastoise or maybe like the Alakazam that we get to. But healing 20 is just really uninteresting, and I think there's just better options for decks that do want to heal. Like there's Rough Seas, you know, there's Max Potion and Expanded. It's just 20 damage is just not going to be relevant enough of the time. And I'd rather have something that actually like prevents the damage. Like we'll get to Wailord that actually, you know, it blocks 30. I think that is much better than healing off because you're stopping the damage from being put on in the first place. We have a Rapidash here that I wanted to quickly address. It's kind of interesting because it's similar to Volcanion EX's from Steam Siege's Steam Up ability. Heat boost. Once during your turn, you may discard a fire energy from your hand. If you do, until the end of turn, the attacks of your fire Pokemon do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. Being on a stage 1 is pretty backbreaking. Just, I can't imagine this really getting anywhere. I have this in my notes as a 1, but I think it's pretty safe to say it's a 0. I think if you want, like, if you're doing like fire-based attacks, you're either going for, if you're evolving, you're going for just big attacks printed on the card itself without, you know, needing to do this fake steam up stuff, or you're just playing basics and you're steaming up like you do in Volcarona. So unfortunately, I don't think this has a home. Maybe, you know, some sort of like one prize thing in Standard, but that's not our problem. And then next we have a whole lot of not playable cards. And then we get 2 Alolan Vulpix and Alolan Vulpix V-Star. Alolan Vulpix V, I think, has a kind of interesting first attack. 60 damage if you're attacking a Pokemon V for no energy. It's alright, I guess. But in terms of like turn 1 damage output, there's just a lot more that you can, you know, just a lot better cards if you want to attack on turn 1 and hit hard. Not really what you want to do, but again, it is a V that's evolving, so not a surprise. Alolan Vulpix V-Star, 240 water type. Watercolors, colors, Snow Mirage, 160 damage. This attack's damage isn't affected by effects on your opponent's active Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. Prevent all damage done to this Pokemon from Pokemon with abilities. I think this is actually very cool. I think this is a very cool attack. But I don't think that a 2 attachment attack is quite cutting it in terms of just being able, like, you're never one-hitting, so that means you're not knocking out really until turn 3, if you're not wallying this, because it's got to evolve. So unfortunately, this just lines up very poorly. I think if there was like an ability heavy metagame of just like a lot of one prizers, then maybe. But as it stands now, this attack just lines up very, very poorly against the expanded metagame. You really even have to work very hard just to knock out a V, like a 210 V, which is pretty rough. Like you gotta have 2 damage modifiers. So that's pretty rough. And then Silver Snowstar, 70 damage. This attack does 70 damage times the number of your opponent's Pokemon V. I'm going to start harping on about this a lot more once we get, deeper into or closer to Scarlet and Violet, and then into Scarlet and Violet, of course, these cards are going to drop off dramatically, but I really hate anything that is V specific, EX, GX specific, tag team specific, because if it doesn't say rule box, the card is just always the card never gets better really, unless some V star spikes up for some weird reason because of expanded metagame reasons. I really don't see these cards improving in the future beyond Scarlet and Violet. And this has kind of been proven time and again with EXs and GXs, unfortunately. So, yeah. Omastar V, wanted to quickly mention, since it is a V, 190 basic. For colorless, Ancient Guidance, basically put 2 fossil cards onto your bench. And then water colorless, 110, during your opponent's next turn, defending evolution Pokemon can attack. That's not really cutting it. Most decks have a basic attacking option at this point. And then Ancient Guidance isn't really cutting it because fossils are just really bad. They're just too slow. They have very cool effects, but their damage output is very, very low. Just not really cutting it, unfortunately. What I think is interesting is this Wailord. Wailord is a 200 stage 1 Pokemon, 200 HP stage 1 Pokemon, and it's got an ability, Oversized. This Pokemon takes 30 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. So, as I mentioned before, I think damage prevention is much better than actual healing. So this is effectively a 230 HP Pokemon, and then 260 if they can't one-hit it, which is it's like a 50-50, but I think it's relatively it's a one prizer, so I think the downside is relatively minimal, even though it's a stage 1. And then the Wailmer is 110, which for a basic one prizer that's evolving, not bad, pretty good, honestly. And then for water colorless, special waves, 120 damage. If this Pokemon has any special energy attached, this attack does 120 more damage. I was about to say 240 damage, that's why. I think you're always trying to get some sort of like a splash energy, or was it the wash energy? I forget what the newer one is, but one of those weird water special energies on there, and then trying to play like a Frostmoth or maybe Kyurem and have, just kind of flood your Wailord with some water energies. I think it is an interesting one prize option in that kind of Frostmoth-ish deck, so I'm going to give it, not a 3, sorry, pardon me. I'm going to give it a 2. I think it's, got potential. I wouldn't say that the Frostmoth deck is quite at that, level in terms of viability. I've been trying to work with it, and unfortunately right now it's just a little too inconsistent, and I can't imagine any of the cards that we'll be talking about today, except for maybe one, will really help that improve. So yeah, we'll see. But it is an interesting and fun card to play, which, Fun is the most important thing. What else we got? We got down here a whole bunch of misses. We have a Fion. Just wanted to briefly mention, I guess. It has a interesting attack for Water Beach Party. Search your deck for one water energy, not for specifically for water Pokemon. Alright, that's not what I meant to say, but it is very good for water Pokemon. Search your deck for up to 3 basic water Pokemon and put them on your bench. Shuffle your deck. So yeah, it's basically a Bridget for water Pokemon. It can get any water Pokemon, or any basic water Pokemon, so it doesn't have any sort of rule box restriction, which is kind of interesting. That could help like set up Frostmoth decks, just getting down a bunch of, Snoms and whatever. Set up your Wailord, set up your Kyurem Vs to evolve into VMAXs. Will it get there? I doubt it. But it is interesting. We have this Pikachu, and in talking about this Pikachu, we're going to talk about a package of cards that we're going to all skip over and just have this Pikachu represent all of them. There's a Pikachu, there's a Dedenne, there's a Togedemaru, there's a Togedash, and there's a Morpeko. So, this Pikachu, HP is 70, basic Pokemon for 1 lightning. It's got Pika Strike 20 damage. If you're Dedenne, use DD Short during your last turn. This attack does 180 more damage. So 200 is a lot. However, these all have these sort of conditional requirements that you have to use one before the other. So they all chain into each other and you have to use them in sequence. I think that is a sick idea. However, like, I think that is like very, very cool game design and a very good idea. However, I believe you can use the Togedemaru and the Togedash for one of them, but you need to chain one into the other specifically, other than the 2 Togas. And there's 4 of them, so you have to use 4 in each order, which I think is just so unflexible that your opponent can play around it so easily, and it's just not going to function. Even with the consistency we have in Expanded, it's just not going to function properly. But it's a cool idea, which I would argue is almost as important, although I would like some more playable cards. Next up, we have the Regielekis. We have a Regieleki V, lightning, 200 HP. Weirdly enough, this one has 1 retreat, and then the VMAX has 0 retreat. I'm not going to question that, but okay. 30 damage for lightning. Switch it with one of your benched. Lightning, colorless, 100 damage during your opponent's next turn. This Pokemon takes 100 less damage from attacks. It's whatever for a V. Evolving, nothing terribly interesting. Nothing that stands out. I mean, 100 less, I guess, is fine, but you're never... I mean, if you're using this beyond, like, the first turn, which I don't know how you're using this, the first turn, you'd have to go kind of turbo, like, you're in a pretty bad spot. Regieleki VMAX is a 310 HP Pokemon with free retreat, lightning type, 3 prizes. I believe the only VMAX of the main set. It's got a ability, Transistor. The attacks of your basic lightning Pokemon do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So it's basically a electro power on a stick that can attack, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure if it's quite good enough to really make it into lightning decks, but it is a free retreater and it's got a pretty serviceable attack. It doesn't have the cost in here for some reason. For lightning, colorless, you do 220 during your next turn. This Pokemon can attack, but it's got free retreats, so it doesn't really matter. I'm kind of into it. I mean, lightning isn't like popping off in Expanded right now, but I think it's at least worth looking at. And considering as like a 1/1 line, I get that it's a 3 prizer and basically a support Pokemon. But I think this deck is like a Pikarom deck, something like that. Like, that's going to be, you're going to be attacking with mostly basics anyways. So, and you don't really need to go beyond like a 1/1 line of this. So honestly, I'm going to give this like a solid 2, which considering all of the cards that we've skipped over, a solid 2 is not bad. We'll take a 2. We'll take a 2. We have Radiant Alakazam. You can't have more than 1 Radiant Pokemon, so you're playing this, or you're playing, remember, like something like Greninja, Charizard, Gardevoir. Take your pick. It's either one of those or a Radiant Alakazam. 130 HP, Psychic type. Ability is Spoonful of Pain. Once during your turn, you may move up to 2 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another one of their Pokemon. And then for Psychic Colorless, Mind Ruler, 20 damage. This attack does 20 damage for each card in your opponent's hand. That effect on a Radiant Pokemon is abysmal. And I mean, spread is still not very good, so, but like, even if you're spreading damage, like you're only moving 2 damage counters. I think if it was 3, it could be worth discussing. I understand that's, you know, fairly powerful, but moving 2 damage counters is just absolutely abysmal. There's like at least 4 better Radiant Pokemon for basically every deck now. So yeah, this is like a hard skip. Very cool art though. I like my dude with the spoons. Next up, we have Unknown V. We've skipped over quite a few psychic type Pokemon, unfortunately. Unknown V is a 180 HP basic Pokemon, psychic, confused seal, 30 damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Whatever. 180 HP. So bad. That is so low. And then triple colorless, victory symbol. If you have 1 prize card left when using this attack, you win. So what I put in my notes was that this is a game-winning attack and a game-losing card. By which I mean, if you put this card in your deck, in an expanded deck, you're probably going to lose the game. But if you're lucky enough not to draw it, and you can attach to it and get down to 1 prize, then sure. I guess you can technically win the game with this. Unknown V-Star is a 250 HP V-Star Pokemon, evolving from the V, obviously. For Psychic, Tri-Power, flip 3 coins. This attack does 70 damage times the number of heads. I'm not playing any sort of coin flip attack in Expanded. Coin flip attacks are unacceptable in Expanded. Never play them. For Colorless, Star Cipher, V-Star Power, until this Pokemon leaves play, it gains an ability that has an effect. All of your Pokemon's weaknesses are now psychic. The amount of weakness doesn't change. So that is absolutely god-awful. If it was an ability, I think it'd be worth talking about. It would be very strong, obviously. But I think it'd be okay because, like, I don't think it would be too strong because this attack is so bad. Like you are going to flip 0 sometimes, so that's pretty bad. But needing 3 colorless, like you could slap a triple acceleration energy in there, right? Like that's I guess something you could do. But you are actively skipping your turn in a very large amount of matchups if you do that. So I think this is a hard miss. Like against 1 prizers, like you have so many options to knock out 1 prizers. There's no reason to give them psychic weakness. And a lot of the times I think you're better off just making a actual real attack rather than turning everything into psychic. And it's not permanent until this Pokemon leaves play. So if they knock it out, that ability goes away. So unacceptable. Which is kind of a shame because I think the card looks very cool. Gardevoir has trade, but it's stage 2, so I don't really care. Mawile V and V-Star. Oh boy. Mawile V for Psychic, Sullen Slap. 30 damage, flip a coin. If it's heads, discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. No. Colorless, bite off, 100 damage, discard a random card from your opponent's hand. Also no. That's a double attachment because you can't triple accelerate onto this. 200, like, yeah, it's fine, I guess, for being a V, but, you know, I really can't imagine this is where you want to be. Mawile V-Star, 260 HP, a little bit stronger, at least, than Unknown. Evolves from the V. For 2 colorless, Sudden Eater and 90 damage. If it went from the bench to the active, it does 90 more. So we've got the kind of Golisopod first impression. Unfortunately, this is not even close to Golisopod GX in terms of power level, especially with this ability. Its ability, Star Rondo. During your turn, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you may use this ability, so it's got to be on the bench. Switch this Pokemon with your active Pokemon, then switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active Pokemon. So not only is it just a Guzma, which I say just a Guzma, which I think in standard would be fine, but in expanded is not. But it's a conditional Guzma. Your opponent has to, you have to have this Pokemon on your bench, which when you consider the amount of V-Star powers and abilities that V-Star attacks, I guess I should say, and abilities that we have, including one that we'll get to that isn't even a Pokemon. There's just so many others that are better. Like, this is just so low impact, unfortunately. So yeah, I mean, one attachment to attack, sure, I guess is okay, but your damage is still capped at 180. And your base attack is 90, which is absolutely horrific and unacceptable and expanded. So, not happening. One card that caught my eye, like, I thought was very interesting. Kind of honestly caught me off guard was this Sigilif. I don't know how to say it properly. For colorless, warning, search your deck for a basic Pokemon and put it onto your bench, then shuffle your deck. If the opponent's active Pokemon is a Pokemon V, you may instead search your deck for up to 5 basic Pokemon and put them onto your bench. I mean, I'm going to give that a strong 1, just on the basis of, like, well, like, one thing is that I think is very interesting is not restricted to first turn. So you could get into some, like, could even fit into some, like, slower controlling decks where you need to get a bunch of different abilities onto the battlefield or a bunch of different basics to evolve into stage 1s or stage 2s or whatever to get abilities online. Like, 5 Pokemon means you can get, like, you can get 2 of the same, like you can get 2, I'm just saying random whatever's, 2 Solosises and 2 Remoraid's. And if they kill one, like, you still have, like, redundant Pokemon on the bench, so that's really interesting. I mean, 5 Pokemon onto the bench, like, you just fill your bench up. That's pretty sweet. And then, yeah, Psychic colorless, 70 damage, whatever. Fortunately, we skip a whole lot of psychics getting skipped. And then I believe we tune in back. Here we go. I'm just going off of my notes here. The Indeedee, that's right. 90 HP psychic basic, 1 Parizer for C, colorless for C. For colorless energy, smart service, if you go first, you can use this attack during your first turn. Search your deck for any 1 card put into your hand. So you can use this going first, obviously, if like maybe something like the Ho-Oh that we'll get to, like that's a card in a deck, archetype, whatever you want to call it, where you're definitely wanting to go first. And if you don't get your Ho-Oh down, I mean, to be honest, I think if you don't get your Ho-Oh down and Ninja Boy the second turn, your shot of winning is very slim, but you at least have a backup that you can do something with on your first turn. So I think it's interesting, searching up a card and being able to use it on your first turn. That kind of deck, yeah, I don't think we'll have quite the legs to be like competitive, but I think it'll be at least fun and half decent on the ladder once it's refined a little bit. All right, next up we have this very, very goofy Dragapult. I thought it was very interesting, though. I think the attack itself is a very interesting design space and is very cool thematically. So, yeah, worth talking about. It's a 150 HP stage 2 Pokemon, which is very rough. But for 1 Psychic, Dragon Launcher. You may discard any number of bench Dreepy that you have. Let me start over. You may discard any number of your bench Dreepy up to the number of your opponent's Pokemon in play. For each Dreepy discarded this way, choose one of your opponent's Pokemon. This attack does 100 damage to each Pokemon chosen in this way. Don't apply weakness and resistance. And then for Psychic Colorless Horjet, 120. This seems so unbelievably difficult to set up consistently, even with the consistency pieces that we have in Expanded. I just can't imagine this ever gets there, and this definitely has some very big issues in terms of just like losing to prizes. You prize 2 Dreepy and you're just like, oh god, how do I ever set this up? You can do some like cool stuff with Zoroark, you know, get some stuff out of the graveyard, discard pile, but honestly I don't think it's really cutting it. We have a Hisuian Arcanine V, 230 HP basic Pokemon. Ability is Irresistible Force as often as you like during your turn. You may move a fighting energy from one of your Pokemon to this Pokemon. Colorless, Rock Bullet, 90 damage. This attack does 30 more damage for each fighting energy attached to this Pokemon. I don't think this really gets there either. I think we discussed this in our previous set review, but fighting is just in a very unfortunate position in the expanded metagame, which is kind of strange because there's a lot of Arceuses running around. But being 4 energy is pretty rough. I know you can max Elixir and do a bunch of energy shenanigans to move on to this, but even at that, if you're not using like strong energy, you're hitting for 210, which is just not really doing it for expanded. 210 for 4. Obviously you have a lot of damage modifiers for fighting, so I guess there's worlds in which you can, you know, get it up to like 250 and then slap a choice band, like you get 2 strong energy and then 2 fighting energy and then a choice band or a choice belt, whatever you prefer. Then you're hitting 280, which is not bad, but you know, that's a lot of pieces that need to come together. And you got to use fighting energy, remember, because this damage modifier in the attack requires the fighting energy. So I would not play like 2 double colorless and then just attack for 90. That is unacceptable. We have a Claydol with, I think, a really cool and interesting ability, as well as a Stonejourner, which I believe has the same sort of deal in the ability or attack. We'll take a look. Its ability, Mystery Charge. Once during your turn, if you have no supporter cards in your discard pile, you may attach a fighting energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. And then it's a stage 1, 110 HP fighting type Pokemon. I think that's really cool. Like playing with no supporters or like lost zoning your supporters somehow. I think it's a cool idea, but in terms of like energy acceleration, I know there's not like the best options for fighting, but I think that supporters and expanded are just kind of too good for this whole idea, this kind of nonsense. I say nonsense, but it's a very cool idea, very cool like theme and design space, and I would definitely like to see more of it. But for expanded, it would need to be much stronger. So yeah, this is unfortunately a hard 0 for me. And then we have a Stonejourner somewhere. Here's my little guy. Incredible art. Incredible art. Look at this dude. He is chilling. He's big chilling, and he'll stay big chilling because he's definitely not going in any decks of mine. But I mean, just look at this dude. Just put him over here. He's a basic fighting 130 HP Pokemon. So for fighting, it has Rock Throw 20 damage, Fighting Colorless, Mysterious Press 60 damage. If you don't have any supporter cards in your discard pile, it does 190 instead. 190 total. 2 attachments, unfortunately. 190 is not knocking out most Vs. some but not most. Also not knocking out most GXs. So unfortunately, I don't think it gets there at all. Well, I know it doesn't get there at all, but a 5 for, you know what? We're going to give him a 5 for art, but unfortunately he's like a 0 in terms of playability. This Ursaluna is somewhere in the same realm as the rest of these fighting types. It is a basic fighting Pokemon, 230 HP. It's got an ability Hard Coat, so takes 30 less damage from attacks. Not bad. Similar to the Wailord, although I guess the Wailord was like damage, but it's going to be more or less functionally the same, I believe. And then for triple fighting energy, has Peach Shoulder, and then 220 damage, does 10 less damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So attacks with minuses in them are generally pretty terrible because it's pretty easy to play around them. They tend to be based on the amount of damage this Pokemon doesn't have, or does have, I should say. So not really terribly into it. 220 is like decent, but then it's triple colored energy, which is like the absolute nail in the coffin. Like not playable whatsoever, unfortunately. Oh, excuse me, we have a Murkrow. In fact, get that one on the screen. Murkrow is a basic dark 60 HP Pokemon. For colorless flock, search your deck for up to 2 Murkrow and put it on your bench, then shuffle your deck. This is a pretty good failsafe against not having like a Dusk Stone to like immediately evolve your Murkrow into a Honchkrow. I think this is definitely the best Murkrow. You immediately switch this out because, you know, if you're stumbling a bit, you just flock, you get more Murkrows at least. You could probably afford a couple of Murkrows getting knocked out, right? Because you're just trying to grind the game to a halt anyways. So, yeah. Big upgrade for the Murkrow decks, and for the 7 people playing the Honchkrow, I say Murkrow decks, the Honchkrow decks. Huge upgrade for the 7 people playing the Honchkrow decks. Big time. Big time. Skuntank V is a dark 210 HP basic Pokemon, and it has a attack, well, it has 2 attacks, but the first one is for a double colorless Homing Bomb. This attack does 30 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. If that Pokemon retreated during your last turn, this attack does 120 damage instead, and then double colorless and a dark 90 damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused and poisoned. This is pretty easy to set up, but honestly, it's just not good enough, and your base damage being 90, even on like base damage on 90, 2 attachments, terrible. Absolutely terrible. Not playable. I think the first attack is very cool. I think I read this at first as 120 more damage. But doing only 120 is pretty rough because you are 3 hitting most V-stars. All V-stars, yeah. You're 3 hitting all V-stars. So yeah, I just don't think that's cutting it at all, unfortunately. That's a hard 0. We have a Metagross somewhere down here. Unfortunately, there's a lot more darkness Pokemon that we're skipping. We have a Metagross, 170 HP Metal Stage 2 Pokemon. Ability Urgent Entry. Once during your turn, if you drew this Pokemon from your deck at the beginning of your turn and your bench isn't full before you put it in your hand, you may put it on your bench. If you do, draw 3 cards. So that upside is pretty cool. Like, being able to actually draw off of it definitely helps. It's basically it could act as like a mini draw like Pokemon supporter, kind of like almost like a mini Crobat in a sense. You do have to do some work to actually set it up. However, I don't think that really matters because I think Expanded just has so many options. I mean, even Standard at this point has so many options to set this up, but Expanded, this is just easy peasy to set up. But the problem is attack is just not relevant whatsoever, and it takes 2 attachments. 100 damage increasing every turn is not good enough, especially because it's probably getting knocked out the first turn it takes a hit. Even at stage 2, it's 170 HP, which is like not that strong for Expanded. So yeah, I think this is a hard 0 as well. Actually, yeah, it's a hard 0 as well. We have a Radiant Jirachi, which I believe is the best Radiant Pokemon in the set. Radiant Jirachi is a 90 HP basic metal Pokemon. You can have more than one Radiant, Pokemon in your deck. Ability is Pass a Wish. If this Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, search your deck for up to 3 cards and put it into your hand. Shuffle your deck. For colorless, flip 2 coins. If both are heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out. So that's kind of interesting. You can do some cool stuff with some like coin flip decks. Kind of I say that having just said at the earlier that, you know, coin flip attacks are unacceptable. But if you are going to play the stadiums or Pokemon that can modify your coin flips, I think this is kind of reasonable. Like you definitely put it in the coin flip decks, right? Because that's the best effect you could really ask for. I think the ability, however, is very interesting for much slower decks, like much slower controlling decks, stalling decks, maybe even like milling decks, where you're definitely getting some amount of Pokemon knocked out. The question is just which ones. With Radiant Jirachi now, you can very easily say, I want this Pokemon knocked out, because you're going to get a triple search off of it. So, boom. I'm going to give that a hard 3. I think in the decks that are basically not attacking, this is a really, really good option. Maybe even the best option in terms of your Radiant Pokemon choice. Skipping a bunch of metal Pokemon, and we get onto Magearna. 210 HP, basic V Pokemon, metal gear throw. This attack does 30 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Not good enough at all. And then metal colorless, special laser, 100 damage. If this Pokemon has any special energy attached, it does 120 more. So 100 base, 220 ceiling is not it. That's not where I want to be for Expanded, especially on a 210 HP Pokemon that is not taking, it's taking max 2 hits. Probably just 1. Like, it's probably getting 1 hit. And then it's a triple attachment, which is just, again, the nail in the coffin. Triple attachment, absolutely unplayable. We go down onto the Regidragos. Regidrago V is a 220 HP basic dragon Pokemon. For colorless, it has Heavenly Scream. Discard 3 cards from the top of your deck and attach all energy discard in this way attached to this Pokemon. So kind of interesting because you can like manipulate that with Oranguru. I don't think you would want to play Oranguru in a Regidrago deck because you want it to be, you know, all dragons, but you can manipulate this a bit. Whether you can do that really on the first turn and get this off, and whether you want to do that on the first turn rather than some other option, I don't think you do, but it's there. And then for Grass Fire, Dragon Laser 130. This attack also does 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. I think this is a fine V attack, honestly. If you're in the position where you do use this, obviously it's a very bad position because, well, in expanded it's a double attachment because we have double dragon energy, but it's okay. 130 and then paying something, it's all right. Then Regidrago V-Star is honestly the main star of the show here in terms of what I would say the set is. 280 HP V-Star Pokemon Dragon type. For grass, fire, you have Dragon Dream. Choose the attack from a Dragon type Pokemon in your discard pile and use it as this attack. Does not require the specific amount of energy. If it did, obviously that would be terrible with the energy requirement that Regidrago V-Star has. It would be very awkward. And then ability Legacy Star. Once during your turn, you may discard 7 cards from the top of your deck. Then you may choose up to 2 cards from your discard pile, reveal them, and put them into your hand. So it doesn't need to be in that pile of 7. It can be cards that are already discarded. So this is very interesting. This is deck number 870,000 that is very good at abusing Battle Compressor. A lot of good options in terms of dragon type Pokemon. A lot of like really strong options like Dragonite, you have Giratina, and you can really get kind of spicy with it and have a lot of fun with it, which I think is really cool. I think it's a really interesting turbo option too, because you want to discard a lot of dragon Pokemon, kind of fill the bin up. You could also play it with something like Gardenia's Vigor, which is funny because we had Mewtwo and Mew with Welder, and now we basically have a kind of weird like copy of it, but only for dragons, and then it requires like grass energy, but it's a dragon. So I think it's very cool in design. I don't know if it's gonna be like an expanded metagame like breaker, but I think it's worth at least addressing. And I think the archetype is probably somewhere in the 3 range, not really quite up to the tournament range. But there's a lot of strong positives that make me think that I could be wrong. Maybe it goes a little higher into like the 4 range. I'm talking about like the deck in general, because this is going to be its own archetype, obviously. This ability I think is really interesting because this is a really good like late game ability where you just get some items back later in the game. I don't think you're ever doing this to actually like discard a bunch of dragons because you have Battle Compressor, so you can just choose which dragons you need in the bin like turn 1 and then kind of go from there. It's got very good V-Star HP, 280. Nothing really goes above 280, so pretty solid. It's a 2 attachment attack because double dragon energy, completely broken. So yeah, I think this is going to be a solid 3. I would not be surprised if it got into 4 range, but I'm trying to be a little more, I wouldn't say I'm trying to be a little more conservative with the ratings, but I think after thinking about it a little bit more, after seeing how Mewtwo Mew has fared, I kind of scaled it back and put it to a 3. However, I will say one thing that is interesting that works in favor of this and hurts Mewtwo Mew a lot. This does not get bricked by like an Alolan Muck, right? Like I think I've done this literally on a video. Like you just play an Alolan Muck, and the Mewtwo Mew deck cannot like operate properly. And in a lot of games, they just can't operate at all. They just have to concede on the spot because they're just gonna get blasted. So it's kind of tough. Like I want to give it a 3.5, but I want to stick to either 3 or 4. And I think I'm gonna go with 3 for now. I think 3 is a pretty reasonable place to go. And I don't mind, like, I'd rather be like a little bit under than a little bit over. All right, we're getting on to the other star of this show here. Oh baby, we have Lugia V and V-Star. Lugia V is a 220 HP colorless basic V Pokemon. For colorless, it has Wind Reading. Discard a card from your hand. Draw 3 cards. Okay. Don't. If you're using that, you're probably going to lose, but hey. And then for 4 colorless, Aero Dive. 130 damage. You may discard any stadium in play. It's fine, I guess. But, I mean, again, attacking with 4 colorless energy on a basic V that's supposed to be evolving and evolving quick. Not terribly interested in attacking with that, but yeah, V Pokemon. Lugia V-Star is a 280 HP V-Star Pokemon. Colorless, 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 colorless. So 4 colorless. Storm Dive, 220 damage. You may discard the stadium in play. And then its ability is Assemble Star. You may use this during your turn. Choose up to 2 colorless Pokemon from your discard pile, except for Pokemon with a rule box, and put them onto your bench. So, no sort of Vs or Radiant Pokemon. It's interesting that they use the words rule box for like restrictions, but they use GXV whatever for like upsides, which is kind of... I wish there were just like more universally good cards, but you know, whatever. I think this ability is incredibly strong. Obviously, it gets paired very well with Archeops, which is, you know, the other. It's kind of like, there's like Batman and Robin. It's like Lugia and Archeops, right? Obviously, there's other stars of the show, mainly Regidrago, but in terms, he's like the Archeops is like the sidekick to Lugia. Like, that's a easy include. I think another interesting include would be the Crazy Code Porygon, which is has a very interesting ability that kind of works like Archeops, but from the hand. So you just attach as many special energy as you like from your hand onto your Pokemon. And then the Archeops, I should mention, the Archeops' ability is search your deck for up to 2 2 special energies. Yeah, 2 special energies, and then attach them to your Pokemon any way you like. So obviously you could do double Archeops. That might be the best, but you could also do like an Archeops and a Porygon Z, and then you have the option to go like 2 from the deck, and then 2 from your hand, or as many as you really like from your hand. There's a lot of good colorless energy options. So I think it is an incredibly strong ability. The problem is not the ability, but the attack. You're going to need a serious amount of damage modifications, and of course, like, your energy is going to act a lot as the damage modifications. You have the strong colorless energy that's currently in standard, but I am hesitant to give this really honestly anything above a 3, and having thought about Regidrago more, I wonder if it's going to be somewhere around a 2, but for now I think I'm good with a 3. I think a 2 might be discrediting and not respecting the archetype enough, because it is, you know, it is the archetype of the set, so I can't imagine it's going to be like unplayably bad, but I can't imagine you would feel comfortable taking it to a tournament full of like Shadow Riders and control decks and just whatever's Arceus's, because even at that, like, Arceus is a very good card, and that ability is still better than the Lugia, and the Lugia takes some amount of setup. Obviously, again, just like Regidrago, another deck that very easily abuses Battle Compressor, but it still takes a decent amount of setup, and I think you may want to include some amount of Wallies into this deck, because I don't think you don't want your Lugias getting knocked out while you're setting up. That's gonna feel really bad. Up next, we have Ho-Oh-V, which is a colorless Pokemon basic. 230 HP. It has an ability, Rebirth Flames. Once during your turn, if this card is in your discard pile, you may put this card onto your bench. if you do, attach 4 basic energy cards from your discard pile to this Pokemon. If you use this ability, your turn ends. And then for 4 colors, Rainbow Burn, 100 damage, and then 30 more for each type of basic energy attached to this Pokemon. So that's a max of 220 output for 4, which is, funny enough, I guess the minimum damage output of Lugia V, but the main idea of this card is, and you're always going, you need to go first. I just want to say that before I even get to the card, but this is a very good card to play with Ninja Boy and Thornton, obviously. This is kind of the combo that everybody's been talking about, Thornton and Ho, you know, switch into some sort of evolving Pokemon, and then you got all your energy there. However, I think for expanded, even with, I've just harped on about Battle Compressor for the last 2 cards, but even with Battle Compressor, needing a Ho-Oh and 5, so needing a Ho-Oh and 4 energy in the discard pile, that's 5 cards that you're asking a decent amount, and you have to do it on turn 1, and you have to go first. And if you don't do it on turn 1 or don't go first, your chances of losing go up dramatically. So you need some sort of different option in terms of, like a backup plan for this deck for sure. Like, I don't think this deck gets anywhere without a backup plan, but honestly, I go ahead and give it like a solid, like maybe a 1. Forgot to take off the 3, but yeah, I give it maybe like a solid 1. Because the archetype is definitely not there and definitely needs a lot of improvement and a lot of metagame shakeup for it to be viable in any sense. A little bit of noise going on, so just took a quick break. But up next we have the Robin of the Batman show, Archetypes, which is a stage 2, 150 HP colorless Pokemon. Has an ability Primal Turbo, so once during your turn you may search your deck for up to 2 special energy cards and attach them to one of your Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. This is why you play Lugia. I think this is a very interesting and very cool card. Dodges, you know, Alolan Mucks and Silent Labs, so you don't have to worry about that. Whether the archetype is strong enough to be an expanded, I'm not sure. Archeops' kind of success, I think personally, is pretty, it's like fate is pretty tied to the success of Lugia V-Star, and I can't really imagine it seeing a lot of play outside of Lugia V-Star. I think maybe you could do something like a Lugia V-Star, Arceus V-Star, Archeops deck. I think that could be potentially interesting, but maybe that's reaching a little too much. But still a very cool card. Give it a solid 2, since it is just kind of like a support Pokemon basically in one deck. And yeah, actually, that'll do it for our Pokemon. Was a pretty short video. Looking to break these up into 2 parts. I wasn't sure if I was going to do a trainer section and a Pokemon section or have it just be 1, but I think I'll just do 2. A quick summary of everything that we've kind of gone over. This is an incredibly underpowered set for expanded. This is, and you know, expanded is 11, 12, I don't even know how many years of cards, but we're going back to black and white, right? So we can't really expect every set to be extremely impactful. But there's no Pokemon that I would give a 4, and most of the Pokemon I would give like like the 3s that we gave are like shaky 3s. They could go up to 4s, but I'd be like not surprised at all if they went down to 2s. So yeah, a little bit disappointed, but we do have some interesting trainers to talk about that we will be getting into on the next video. So make sure you like and subscribe, leave a comment what you think. Yeah, am I underrating this set? Are there any cards that you think I just completely glazed over and just missed on? I would definitely like to know, like, the expanded community's thoughts. So yeah, make sure y'all have a good one, and see you next time. Thanks.